Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today and welcome to the Monarch Conservation webinar series. Today's webinar is the first of 2025. It is Monarch Butterfly Conservation on DoD lands, presented by Stephanie Hertz from the Department of Defense, Dejeanne May from Environment for the Americas, and Mercy Manzanares from Monarch Joint Venture. My name is Jenna Tots. I'm Education Coordinator at the Monarch Joint Venture. I'm joined by my coworkers, Alexa Cook, Department of Defense Science and Monitoring Associate, and Alyssa Taylor, Program Coordinator. We want to thank our sponsor for today for the webinar series, our supporting sponsor, Reinvent Your Waste. We appreciate your support and dedication to monarch conservation. If you or your company is interested in sponsoring the webinar series this year, please email me, learn@monarchjointventure.org. Before we get started, we just have a few community guidelines and helpful hints for the webinar today. If you're joining us today but did not pre-register, we would like to count you for a registration, be able to send you some follow-up materials on Friday. You can email learn@Monarch Joint Venture with your name, city, and state, and we'll get you registered. This webinar will be recorded. Usually I'll have it up by tomorrow, but for Friday, for sure. You can go to the Monarch Joint Venture website and see the entire webinar conservation series for free. There are 10 years of amazing webinars up that you can watch. During this webinar, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box. It can be found at the bottom of the Zoom screen. We'll collect those questions for the Q&A session at the end, and please use reactions. Also, there's a little react button at the bottom. You can clap, you can heart, you can thumbs up as the presenters talk. Very fun for the presenters to be able to see that and interact with you in a little way. We want to remind you that there are translated captions and closed captioning for this Zoom call. If you'd like to add captions in another language other than English, click on the arrow on captions and be sure the translation button is on, and then you can choose your caption language. And finally, all of our webinar speakers represent their own viewpoints, which are not necessarily those of the Monarch Joint Venture. I'll introduce our speakers now, and then we will go to our first presenter. Stephanie Hertz serves as the Recovery and Sustainment Partnership, or RASP, Coordinator for the Department of Defense Environmental Planning and Conservation Program within the Office of the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense Environmental Management and Restoration. The RASP is a partnership between the DoD and the Department of Interior focused on developing and promoting conservation and recovery initiatives for threatened, endangered, and at-risk species, while promoting increased flexibility for military mission activities. As the coordinator for DoD, Stephanie focuses on proactive, innovative, and collaborative approaches that enhance implementation of the Endangered Species Act, sustain and enhance the military mission, and achieve greater conservation outcomes for species. Dejeanne May serves as Program Manager for the Department of Defense, Monarch Department of Defense project with Environment for the Americas. Based in El Paso, Texas, she leads efforts to support monitoring and outreach across military installations along the monarch butterfly's migratory route by engaging interns in meaningful conservation work. Dejeanne holds a BA in Environmental Science from Boston University and an MS in Wildlife Science from the New Mexico State University, and has background in bird conservation. As a military spouse, she is committed to bridging connections between veterans, military families, and meaningful employment opportunities. Her mission extends beyond conservation. She strives to inspire an appreciation for nature while providing support and opportunities for those who have served and their families. Mercy champions national monarch pollinator conservation by supporting projects across MJV's priority focus areas of science, education, and habitat. She is a knowledgeable pollinator ecologist with a habitat monitoring and management background. Mercy is skilled in finding the balance between development and the environment through her experience working on infrastructure projects in the transportation, renewable energy, and public and private sectors. Her experience with threatened and endangered species consultation allows her to understand project impacts on national resources thoroughly. Mercy holds a BS in biology and BA in Spanish from Nebraska Wesleyan University, as well as an MS in biology from the WAC. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie to start us off today.
Sounds great. Thank you so much to Monarch Joint Venture just for this invite today to speak on the webinar and for the opportunity to showcase how the Department of Defense and its natural resource programs have been enabling the National Defense Mission and supporting ecosystems, habitats, and species like monarchs and other pollinators. So really, really excited to be here today. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so for the next 10 to 15 minutes, I'll be sharing with you an overview of the DoD Natural Resources Program just to provide some context behind our scope and mission. And then next, I'll go into a national conservation strategy that DoD has been developing alongside Fish and Wildlife Service for the monarch butterfly and why monarchs and pollinators are more broadly are important to DoD. Following that, I'll provide some information related to the DoD Legacy Resource Management Program and how it's supporting current and future mission needs in monarch research and conservation. And then I'll end my presentation with some examples of additional DoD programs, partnerships, and policies that are working to enable DoD's combat readiness mission that also have benefits to pollinators like monarchs. Next slide. Thank you. The DoD owns or operates on about 27 million acres of open land, water, and airspace. And our natural resources programs work to enable the defense mission by maximizing and enhancing mission flexibility through natural resources stewardship and maintaining the long-term sustainability of DoD lands and resources for realistic testing, training, and operations. A lot of people don't realize, but DoD is the 5th largest U.S. land managing agency, and we harbor more sensitive species per acre than any other federal land managing agency. We have 339 installations that are considered to have significant natural resources. And these installations are guided by integrated natural resource management plans, or as we call them, INRMPs, that serve as blueprint for conserving ecosystems and species, protecting training and testing environments, and preserving natural landscapes necessary for mission requirements. Next slide. Thank you. So in December 2024, the Fish and Wildlife Service proposed listing the monarch butterfly as a threatened species under the Endangered Species Act. The monarch butterfly, as many of you know, is a very wide-ranging species. DoD has over 300 installations located within the monarch's range, so its listing under the ESA could result in regulatory requirements for the DoD. DoD's primary mission, of course, is national defense, and so we have to find ways to balance the military mission needs with conservation of imperiled species. And DoD also has stewardship responsibilities that we take very, very seriously for our nation's natural heritage and the species and the habitats supported on our lands. So recognizing all of this, the importance of the monarch, the significance of a listing decision on DoD and our installations, should the species be listed, DoD has been collaborating with Fish and Wildlife Service to develop a national conservation strategy for monarchs through the Recovery and Sustainment Partnership, or as we like to call it, the RASP. So the RASP was established back in 2018 to develop and promote species conservation and increase flexibility for military mission activities. And this partnership really was the ideal umbrella really to work together and develop this national conservation strategy, because the RASP it really builds on years of collaboration between DoD and the Department of Interior, looking at innovative approaches, using science and technology and things like ecosystem management to achieve real-world success for both military readiness and species. So we do have some goals for the National Conservation Strategy. We want to have consistent and streamlined ESA consultation approach for monarchs for all applicable DoD installations. Standard best management practices that are going to contribute to the conservation of pollinators while also minimizing any potential mission restrictions due to ESA compliance. We want to, of course, improve the conservation status of the monarchs as well, and then also have standards and protocols for monarch inventory, monitoring, data collection, storage, things like that, so we can enable timely management and conservation decisions. We also think the national strategy is going to have broader benefits to pollinators and native ecosystems. And then we also know that diverse native plant communities are more resilient to impacts from things like training activities. Can you go to the next slide for me? Perfect. It's really important to recognize that DoD has worked on monarch butterfly conservation for more than a decade. We have really unique authorities and strong conservation programs that promote ecosystems across our land base. And the department's longstanding commitment has resulted in significant contributions to the conservation of monarch and other at-risk pollinators. So building on that strong history of DoD conservation programs and ecosystem management, DoD and Fish and Wildlife Service developed this conservation strategy, which also serves as a regulatory solution that enables DoD to sustain and enhance the DoD mission, contribute to the conservation of monarch, and also streamline regulatory processes under ESA Section 7A2. And the strategy supports things like military mission and sustainment activities, ecosystem management under our integrated natural resource management plans pursuant to the Sykes Act, policies and procedures related to the use of pesticides on installations, as well as monarch conservation and research programs that benefit monarchs, pollinators, ecosystems, and military lands alike. The conservation strategy enables DoD to meet its mission with flexibility that we need, and it also promotes the continued implementation of conservation programs that benefit monarchs on over 1.7 million acres of grasslands that DoD manages by providing nectar and milkweed resources and protecting 53 sites for overwintering monarchs. Next slide. Thank you. So now I'd like to discuss the DoD Legacy Resource Management Program. This is a 34-year-old strategic and competitive funding program that invests in activities and projects that directly benefit DoD's mission and stewardship objectives. The Legacy Program works in conjunction with the military services, as well as other federal and state agencies, NGOs, academia, to identify the most pressing current and future conservation challenges. And since its establishment, the Legacy Program has funded over 3,400 projects for a total funding amount of $405 million, benefiting over 300 military installations worldwide. Next slide. So an estimated $12 million in legacy funding has been provided over a decade for monarch research and conservation to better support current and future mission needs. Over the years, the Legacy Program has engaged a variety of subject matter experts and researchers and pollinator stakeholders to support monarch butterfly conservation projects, provide technical assistance and guidance to our installations through habitat assessments, assist with inventory and monitoring, developing best management practices, conducting research to fill key information gaps, and many other activities that will ultimately support the mission. The Legacy Program also joined the National Public Lands Day Partnership back in 1999 to support volunteer habitat restoration, as well as cultural and historical projects on military installations throughout the U.S., and has funded nearly 600 National Public Land Day events on military installations, several of which were dedicated efforts to monarch butterfly conservation. So National Public Lands Day is the nation's largest single-day volunteer event for public lands. Next slide. Okay, so DoD has a number of programs and partnerships and policies with the primary purpose of supporting military testing and training. But I do like to highlight these efforts because many of them result in benefits to ecosystems, habitats, and species like pollinators as well. So this is not an exhaustive list by any means, but it's just sort of a snapshot. Now, I talked about the integrated natural resource management plan. So these really are the plans that help DoD managers manage their ecosystems and species and habitats on military lands. And some examples of monarch related projects you might see in an NRIP could include things like surveys for monarchs and milkweed, monarch tagging, monarch way stations, research, pollinator gardens, invasive species control, or land management practices that benefit pollinators broadly. We also have DoD's Pest Management Program, and this program provides policies and procedures that limit or reduce the use of insecticides and herbicides. We also have various programs at the DoD. I talked about the Natural Resources Program early in my presentation, and also the Legacy Resource Management Program. Two other programs that I wanted to mention, one is the Readiness and Environmental Protection Integration Program, or the REPI program. So the REPI program is a key tool for combating encroachment that can limit or restrict military training, testing, and operations. The REPI program protects military missions by helping remove or avoid land use conflicts near installations, and also addressing regulatory restrictions that could inhibit military activities. And so by protecting and managing landscapes around military lands in order to sustain the mission, the ecosystems and the species that live within them benefit too, which can include monarch. The Strategic Environmental Research and Development Program and Environmental Security Technology Certification Program. These programs I wanted to mention as well because they fund research and harness the latest science and technology to improve DoD's environmental performance, reduce costs, and enhance and sustain the mission capabilities. And so, funding from some of these programs has helped inform pollinator management on DoD lands as well. And then a few partnerships. I did talk about the RASP a little bit earlier. The RASP was the umbrella that we used to work on the National Conservation Strategy. So monarch was identified as a priority species between DoD and the Department of Interior. And so we wanted to work together on this National Conservation Strategy to just enhance our coordination and work together to achieve this kind of regulatory solution that was going to provide benefits to all. And then the Sentinel Landscapes Partnership. This is a partnership that was founded back in 2013, and it aligns the objectives of Department of Defense, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Department of the Interior, and the Federal Emergency Management Agency to strengthen military readiness and conserve natural resources, bolster agricultural and forestry economies, increase public access to outdoor recreation, and enhance landscape resilience as well. So a lot there. And then we also have quite a few focus working groups on pollinators, different memoranda and guidance documents, and just policies that will support monarchs and pollinators and native ecosystems. So a few final thoughts from me. Public engagement and partnerships are a really strong part of how DoD accomplishes its goals. So collaboration among federal, state, NGO, university partners is really vital to conserving pollinator species and the ecosystems upon which they depend. And together we can develop strategies and coordinate our resources and expertise and our conservation activities across jurisdictions in ways that benefit both the western and eastern populations of the monarch, and build habitat connectivity, reduce those threats, and achieve meaningful conservation outcomes. And then making sure we're sharing information along the way so that we all know the best available science, and we can, make good policies and management decisions based on that as well. So if you can go to my last slide. So this is my last slide. So I understand we're going to be opening up for questions at the end of the webinar. So I'll be here for that. But I did want to provide some QR codes. If you want to find out more information, we've got a QR code for the Natural Resources Program Story Map, the DoD Legacy Program, the RAS website, also our Environmental Planning and Conservation listserv. And you've got my email address and also Mike Langston's email address. Mike Langston runs the Legacy program. And so if you have questions for either of us, you can also reach out to us there. So with that, I will hand things over, and thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Stephanie. I'm just popping on real quick. I will let you know that these will all be in the follow-up email. So we'll put all of that in there. So don't worry if you don't get it all right now.
All right. So thank you so much, Stephanie, for the overview on the legacy and all the great work that natural resource managers and the Department of Defense is doing for monarchs and other species. So I'm going to focus mainly on what the Monarch Joint Venture has been doing through this U.S. Forest Service DoD agreement. So this agreement kind of kicked off in 2023, and it's been such a great program for us so far. We have been focusing on our 4 pillar areas here at the Monarch Joint Venture. And so that means science through habitat surveys, mainly using the Integrated Monarch Monitoring Program. Then our training workshops. So we've ran over 10 training workshops across the country where we have trained over 300 different DoD staff and partners. Then working on under the pillar of habitat, we look to be helpful to the natural resource managers when it comes to technical assistance for habitat restoration and enhancement for monarchs and other pollinators. So just some of the impact by the numbers is just last year, we ran 494 IMMP plots in coordination with our Environment for the Americas interns. And those were conducted across 50 different military installations. And so with that information, we're able to see, a very large swath of what monarch butterfly habitat looks like across the entire country. Again, our training workshops, we work directly with natural resource managers to, pull their partners into the room. So we'll reach out to the managers, they'll help us find the space. We make sure that their state partners and regulators are also there, in addition to other nonprofits that are interested in learning about monarch butterflies. And this is all with the idea of getting more habitat on the ground. So last year, we helped natural resource managers establish or restore over 150 acres of monarch habitat across the United States. So this is just kind of a snapshot of like where we were. So it's kind of sweet that we were able to be within 21 different states. There was a focus within the I-35 migratory corridor. However, there is monarch butterfly habitat across, over 300 different military installations, and they all have questions when it comes to managing for monarchs. So one of the things that we did last year was run our integrated monarch monitoring program. And just a quick overview of what that entails, for those of you who aren't familiar with this monitoring protocol, it's milkweed and nectar plants. And then there is also, we are looking for eggs and larvals, so caterpillars within those milkweed plants. And then we also do adult monarchs. We didn't do activity 4 just because we had a number of different teams that were only there for snapshots in time, and that one's a little bit more involved. But I'd like to just give a plug for the IMMP. It's something that everybody can do. We have lots of training videos for free online. So here's just kind of an overview of what we found. And so these are some of the things that we are able to provide the managers in terms of data analyses. So we did just kind of a summary of everything that we were able to find on the military installations, and that included 23 different species of milkweed. And so that really demonstrates, the diversity that can be found on some of these DoD installations. Some fun ones are always the woolly pod milkweed, which we found in California. Other more rarer species like Engelmann's milkweed is one that we don't find that often. Also, clasping or bluntleaf milkweed is another one that's a little bit more rare across the landscape. I'd also like to highlight that we found, some county records for the first time within our blooming plant species on these military installations, which really helps to demonstrate, the great work that the natural resource managers are doing when it comes to that larger ecosystem management and managing for biodiversity. Just some quick stats that we pulled from our IMMP surveys is, the average number of species that we observed was 0.76, and the maximum species of milkweed that were observed in one survey was 6, which is pretty impressive to find 6 different species of milkweed within a 1 acre plot. The average number of blooming plants was 9.32. So there is almost 10 different species of blooming plants within these IMMP plots. And then the maximum number of blooming forb species observed in one survey was 54. I'm assuming that one probably took a little bit more than an hour. So these are just some state highlights that we have. So Texas, there was a number of military installations that we surveyed. Again, a number of different forb species and milkweed species found in that area, mainly highlighting viridis, and this one's a Zoethes milkweed. I haven't even seen that one. I'm really excited. I'll be going to Texas later this year to be on some military installations. I hope to see that one. Oklahoma, we went to 4 different installations in Oklahoma and found larvae and milkweed on all of them. So it was a very interesting survey. Again, average number of blooming forb species per site was 14.15. Colorado, again, a very different landscape when compared to some of the other installations that we have in the Midwest. You can see here that there is a little bit less diversity in terms of our blooming forb species. Per site. But again, Colorado and Texas are 2 of the places that we'll be focusing our surveys next year. California represents a very different landscape to the Midwest, and we found 2 different species of milkweed consistent across the DoD landscape, and there was 7.5 blooming forbs on average. We did find eggs and larvae in every single state that we surveyed in. The maximum number of larvae found was 9, and the maximum amount of adult butterflies is 4 that we found in one survey. These surveys were usually just done one time, and so it gives us kind of a snapshot in terms of the timing that they would be present on these military installations. Another highlight of the Monarch Joint Venture program were the workshops. That's probably my favorite part, because it's a time for us to, share the knowledge that we have about monarch butterflies, and then sit down and talk to the natural resource managers and their partners on how we can help them, establish monarch butterfly habitat or improve monarch butterfly habitat on their installation. So I took some pictures from the Camp Ripley Sentinel Landscape Monarch workshop that we had last year. We were lucky enough to have 27 different participants from 8 organizations. Again, we ran over 10 different workshops like these across the country that included, federal, state, and other nonprofit partners, all in one room talking about monarchs. And so it's one thing that we do is we call it the reciprocity ring. And it's where we can kind of figure out, like, if you don't have enough folks to conduct some sort of habitat management, like burning on your installation, it's kind of like a problem-solving exercise that we do, to help the natural resource managers and their partners within the region. In the end, we ended up having over 50 different organizations attend those in-person workshops, and we're continuing those again this next year. Again, it's all about getting habitat on the ground. And so this is one of our biggest pushes for this year, is to help fund efforts within DoD installations to help them improve or restore habitat within their areas. You can see here, all these pictures are from different states, and they represent like the breadth of monarch habitat and how different it can look across the landscape. So Stephanie did mention National Public Lands Day, and I'm going to talk about this just in a minute in terms of like other ways that like if you like a normal monarch enthusiast can get involved with the Department of Defense. But I'm going to hand it off to Dejeanne.
Hello, everybody. Thank you all so much for being here today. I'm super excited to be a part of this webinar. And today, what I'm going to be focusing on is telling you about our Monarch internship program and how it fits into this larger project. So our organization is called Environment for the Americas, or EFTA for short. It's a nonprofit that works with an array of federal agencies and other organizations, primarily to promote bird conservation and to also provide pathways to careers in natural resources. Our programs place interns into conservation-related positions all over the country, and last year we had almost 200 interns working with us. In 2023, we partnered with the DoD Legacy Program and the U.S. Forest Service to apply our internship model to study and monitor monarchs on military bases. And with this program, our focus is really on recruiting and engaging military-affiliated individuals, and our internships vary in length to accommodate our interns' needs and availability. So I wanted to just take a moment to talk about why we have this emphasis on engaging military families. So starting with veterans, who make up about 6% of the US population, most veterans report that they have a hard time transitioning from the military to civilian life. And one of the biggest hurdles they mention is finding meaningful employment. But despite these challenges, veterans bring with them a lot of strengths to the workforce, including having extensive training completed during their service. Employers also report that veterans are more team-oriented, adaptable, and dependable than their peers. For military spouses, they also face unique challenges. The main one is unemployment. Unemployment is 7 times higher for military spouses compared to the general population. And even among those spouses who are employed, 2/3 of them report being underemployed, or in other words, they don't feel like their jobs line up with their education experience or provide opportunities for advancement. And nearly half of active duty families say that spouse employment is their single most pressing issue. So that ranks even even higher than things like deployments. And so military spouses, they serve as the backbone of active duty families and usually serve as the primary caregiver while also navigating frequent relocations. And as a spouse myself, I can attest to the challenges that come with this life. Military spouses tend to be highly educated, and according to employers, they demonstrate resiliency, resourcefulness, cultural competence, and despite misconceptions, their retention rates are higher than average. So last year, we set out to recruit veterans and military dependents, focusing on how we can help break down some of these barriers that they face in finding meaningful careers. And we ended up with a team of 13 really phenomenal interns, 9 of whom were either veterans, military spouses, or dependents, or soon to be active duty themselves. And the cool thing is that a lot of these interns were working on an installation where either they served themselves or their spouse had served, or one of their parents had served in the military. We worked across 30 installations in 10 states, so some of our interns got to do a little bit of traveling. And before heading to the field, the interns got to train with biologists like Mercy from the Monarch Joint Venture and from the Xerxes Society. And these pictures show some of our training events and workshops in Texas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, and California. A big emphasis is actually placed on habitat monitoring since surveying nectar resources and milkweed is a big focus of ours. So like Mercy mentioned, we conducted IMMP surveys, and our primary goal was to collect baseline data across these installations. So we conducted almost 400 surveys using this protocol that Mercy talked about, and our interns identified a whole lot of blooming plant species, over 500 species, and they actually inspected over 20,000 milkweed plants across these installations, finding eggs, larvae, and adult butterflies during their surveys. And one thing, I think that when people think about military bases and what they look like, they don't really imagine that they can contain these vast landscapes. So here are just some of the photos of monarchs and milkweed and blooming plants that we observed across these military bases that we worked on. Every single installation we visited had milkweed, sometimes multiple species, like Mercy mentioned, and monarchs were observed on all but 2 installations during our visits. And so for every survey site, we also documented things like conservation management efforts that had been conducted there. So things like prescribed fires, seedings, plantings, and more than 200 of our survey sites had some kind of conservation work done, showing the level of care given to these lands. And all of the data that we collected was shared with the Department of Defense and the installation natural resource managers to help with making future management decisions. One of the other data sets that our interns contributed to in California was the Western Monarch Milkweed Mapper. And this is a really cool program that one of our partners, the Xerxes Society, is a part of. And by the way, this is an open source data set that anyone can contribute to. Some of the other things that they worked on, including planting milkweed at Camp Ripley in Minnesota, helping with setting up towers to conduct MODIS tagging in California, and then also collecting some baseline data that was needed for a restoration project that will be starting this year at some of the installations in California. And then the interns also contributed to data sets like Journey North, and then to a study that's being conducted on milkweed and monarch phenology out of UC Davis. In California, we also conducted overwintering surveys across 30 groves on 3 installations to contribute to the Western monarch count there. So this year, as many of you know, was an extremely low year for monarchs in the West. And unfortunately, our numbers were on par with what was being observed throughout the state. But nonetheless, this data is important to have so that we can continue to protect these groves. One aspect of our program is getting the community involved through education and outreach. So some of the things that we did included leading activities for local Girl Scout and Boy Scout troops. You can see some pictures down here. Our interns set up like monitoring stations for the kids to participate in collecting field data. They gave them like these little mini field notebooks, and they got to practice taking notes and making observations. We handed out milkweed kits at a pollinator conference. So yeah, just thinking about ways that we can get the community involved. Then before I end, I just wanted to highlight a couple of our intern stories, starting here with Britt. Britt had last year, she had just retired from the Army after 13 years of service, and this was her very first position out of the military. And so when she was transitioning out of the military, she didn't really know exactly what she wanted to do next, but after this internship, she has become set on becoming a park ranger. Elizabeth here was one of our interns in California. And so when she started this internship, she had just moved to Vandenberg Space Force Base as a military spouse. And she was getting ready to enter the Space Force as an officer herself. So now she's now in the Space Force. She's active duty, and she plans to use the knowledge that she gained during this internship to help promote awareness and conservation within the military itself. And so I included some graphs she did here because all of our interns conduct a final project, and she did a really cool project looking at the relationship between milkweed presence and proximity to water. Olivia here is one of our military spouses who worked out of Dyess Air Force Base in Texas. And she had also just recently moved there to the base, and she was finishing her associates in meteorology when she started this internship. And during the internship, she gained a deep appreciation for natural resources, and she has now decided to pursue her education in environmental science. And so these pictures are from her final project, looking at the seasonal differences in blooming plants and milkweed density. You can see lots of plants in the spring, and then it was pretty dry conditions in the fall. So this is my last slide here, and I have a couple of QR codes, one for anyone who might be interested in joining our team as an intern, and then another code for anyone who might be associated with an installation and would like more information or would like to know how they might be able to get involved. You can also send me an email or just visit our website. So yeah, I'd like to just give a big thanks to the Monarch Joint Venture for inviting me here today and for our continued partnership with you all. And thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Dejeanne. Thank you, Mercy. Thank you, Stephanie, for sharing this incredible project that y'all are working on. When I first learned about it, like Dejeanne had said, you kind of think about a military installation. You don't think about all of this beauty and all of this biology that's happening, and it's pretty incredible. So we'll take some time to ask some questions, and anything that we don't get to, we send over to our speakers with multiple speakers. Hopefully we can get those questions answered. And then again, we'll send a follow-up email on Friday that will include a recording to this presentation. It'll have answers to questions, and also all of the wonderful resources that the speakers have talked about. So there'll be lots of links and things, everything from the DoD page and talking about the project on the MJV site. We'll put the information about the EFTA internships. So all of that will come on Friday to your inbox. So please be sure you are signed up. We'll put the sign up again in the chat here in a second. It seems that many of you may not have signed up through the registration place, so please be sure you do that so you can make sure you get that. So let me jump over to our questions.
So Jenna, I do know that some of the questions that have popped up are about how to get more involved with the DoD. So one of the things that we did mention was National Public Lands Day. And so you can go to neaf.usa.org, and they have a neat little map that you can go ahead and select. So National Public Lands Day is usually the third Saturday of September, and a number of different installations have events that you can volunteer Here you can see some folks having fun at Little Rock Air Force Base. That was a project that we helped send materials to. And then Fort Eustis also had a really great National Public Lands Day last year. Additionally, there's a few other ways that you can interact with the DoD and their natural resource programs. A lot of different DoD installations have hunting programs that you can, enter into a lottery for. But they also have, different sorts of like outreach centers. This one is at Pax Naval Base in Maryland. This one's right here in Nebraska. You can go camp on the Camp Ashland site. It's a really beautiful area that has a playground. I was able to last year for their Beyond Their Barracks Earth Day event, but local DoD's website for these other sorts of opportunities. And I know that Stephanie really focused a lot on the legacy program and how these managers are, improving the entire ecosystem health within the DoD landscape. And I just wanted to thank the managers. They're such great folks to work with. And, we look forward to another year of this project. So I think with that, now we can go ahead and transition into questions.
Great, Mercy. Thank you so much. Yes, there were a couple of questions about that. So hopefully that answered a little bit of those questions about how to get involved. Let's start with a question for Stephanie. Could you share some of the monarch overwintering site locations that are on DoD land? And if anybody else has anything to add with that, so specifically about overwintering sites.
Sure, and one of Dejeanne's slides actually showed some of the overwintering locations in California. So that's one example. Within the Fish and Wildlife Service proposed listing in the Federal Register, they talk about overwintering sites there as well. Also in this National Conservation Strategy that DoD Fish and Wildlife Service developed together, we do talk about overwintering sites on DoD lands. We don't have that posted yet, but it will eventually be available for people to take a look at. And so those are just some other places that you could find that information. But Dejeanne did have a great slide that shows at least some of the overwintering sites, not all of them, but some of them.
Great, thank you. And Dejeanne, if you want to throw that up and share your screen again, just to show that would be awesome. There were a couple of questions specifically for Mercy about just getting involved, like other installations, how do we go about, arranging the workshops or participating? I don't know, Mercy, if you want to talk to that a little.
Yeah, you can send me an email at mercy@monarchjointventure.org or just contact me through your page. So one of the things that we're doing is also, I want to set up some like regional, like virtual webinars. Like we will be at the National Military Fish and Wildlife Association, giving some of the workshops that we've been doing throughout the country, but I feel like there's still like such a need to do things that like not everyone gets to go to NMFWA. So if you're interested in, any sort of assistance like related to monarchs or their pollinators, just go ahead and shoot me an email.
Great, thank you. And we'll be sure to include Mercy's email in that, the email that comes on Friday. This question's for Dejeanne. I know with the internship posted, are these internships and volunteer possibilities only for the military community, or is anybody available to or able to apply?
That's a good question. Our internships are open to anyone. Anyone can apply to the internship programs. We just have a emphasis on hiring veterans and military spouses and dependents. But this year or last year, it was 9 out of 13 of our interns were military affiliated. So we did have non-military interns who worked with us.
Wonderful, thank you. And again, we'll put that link in there as well. Here's one for Stephanie. Will the DoD US Fish and Wildlife Service Monarch Agreement also cover ARNGs? The National Guard sometimes gets left out.
Yes, it will cover National Guard sites. Yes.
I know Alexa has done some work up near me. I'm in Minnesota at a National Guard site. So yes,
Yeah, the key will really be the different military installations, becoming familiar with the strategy and its components, and then making sure that they're able to adopt and implement whatever relevant aspects of the strategy apply to their situation. And as long as they're implementing the strategy, then they should be positioned well if the Monarch is listed later this year in December 2025, if that does become federally listed. So yeah, as long as you implement the strategy, yes, Army National Guard sites would be eligible.
Mercy, I'm not sure if this one is just referring to IMMP. It says, is there a publication available for the Monarch monitoring protocol?
If it's just referring to the IMMP, yeah, we have several different publications out that highlight, the results of IMMP. I can get those from our science group. Maybe we can send those out in the email on Friday as well. And then just kind of addressing the National Guard. Yeah, we've been on several National Guard sites. They're honestly some of my favorites, the ones that I've been on, and we've worked across all 5 branches of the military.
I know we kind of answered this maybe a little bit when we talked about how to get involved. But there was one specifically, can the public become involved in these surveys at all? Or is this strictly because you're on these bases and such? Is it strictly for personnel?
I guess I'm going to take that one. It kind of depends, like there, especially like on some of the military installations that have overwintering grounds, like they have had different sorts of volunteers come on and count monarchs. Again, I would look for your in like the closest installation to you to see if they have any sort of volunteer opportunities to, run different types of surveys, or like, for example, the Earth Day event that I went to at Camp Dodge. There's a lot of help needed to like invasive species control. So like taking out invasive honeysuckle. So like these installations also need help to, reduce invasive species. So I would check out your installation's website, their Facebook page, to see if there are any sort of natural resource volunteer opportunities.
Thank you. There were a couple questions related to just natural disasters as of late. This one question came in during Stephanie's talk, but I think anyone could take this if they wanted. What impact did you see having on the monarchs from natural disasters, California, Florida, Texas? Someone specifically called out wildfires. I don't know if y'all have seen specifics related to that lately.
I don't have any information related to that. We do have other partners that are also doing surveys in other areas of the country, so it might be something that they have some knowledge about. But Dejeanne, Mercy, do either of you have knowledge on potential impacts from fires and things like that to survey sites?
Luckily, at least at our survey sites, they haven't been impacted by any of the fires this year.
Good to hear. And this one's for Dejeanne, just a simple question. Were the number of IMMP sites monitored by EFTA in addition to Mercy's, or did you guys have the same number on there?
I think I was sharing a subset of what Mercy was sharing, because I was just sharing what our interns collected. So that data fed into this larger data set that we have along with MJV.
Great. Stephanie, do you know if the DoD conservation strategy for Monarch is publicly available?
We want to post it online, and I think that will happen, but I don't have a timeline yet for when that will be posted.
Here's an interesting one, and I'm not sure if anyone could answer this one or not. Do you know if there are similar conservation efforts on Canadian military land? A stumper. We'll look into that one. Let's see. I know you called out public lands date. Do we have an actual date for 2025? I can't recall if someone said the actual date.
I will look it up.
Sorry, there are so many questions.
It looks like this year it is on Saturday, September 27th is National Public Lands Day.
Everyone take out your calendars, write it down, find your local base, figure out what you're going to participate in. This one's a good one. Maybe Mercy or Stephanie or really anyone. do you help other species too, or just as a side effect of helping monarchs? I know this is kind of a generalized question, one that we get at MJV quite a bit, but maybe to speak to that kind of monarchs in more emphasis.
So can you read that one more time? Because I want to
Yep.
make sure I'm answering it correctly.
Do you help other species too, or the just a side effect? Is there something really specific to other species, or is it kind of that side effect of helping monarchs?
So I would answer from the DoD perspective. So on DoD lands, we manage for over, I want to say 550 threatened and endangered species on our lands, and there's hundreds more that are at-risk species. And so DoD land managers, we certainly do have to take a look at the lands and ensure that they are sustainable and that we're providing realistic habitat conditions for, training and testing activities. And we're also thinking through what those management requirements might be for these different species that we're managing. And we also try to do a lot of proactive work as well to benefit species that, maybe are becoming more rare. And so are there things that we can do to bolster those species populations as well? So yeah, it's certainly not just monarch. DoD manages for a lot of federally listed and at-risk species in general.
I've got another one for Stephanie here. Has any DoD technologies been employed to track monarch migration?
I think DoD has been exploring MODIS, the use of MODIS, if I'm correct on that, where they use these towers to try to track various species, not just monarchs, but other species as well. So I think that's one thing that they're in the earlier stages of for tracking monarchs. So that would be one example I would provide.
We do have a talk coming up in July, I believe it is, from various people that are working on MODIS around the country, mainly I think in California, but there's a number of different people working on that. So becoming quite popular to track monarchs. So
yeah, and I will mention we did this year we did help set up some towers at Vandenberg. However, the California numbers were so low this year that we weren't able to actually put those tags out this year. So we're hoping next year that can be implemented.
Great. Fingers crossed for higher numbers next year. Mercy, do you have an impression as to whether milkweed is limiting in these habitats? I'm surprised by the low number of monarch observations per survey.
Yeah, the low number of monarchs per survey is mainly because it was just most of the time we were there for 1 week, right? So we were doing as many surveys as we could get to get that baseline data down. And so we weren't getting the repeat surveys. And so that's one of the reasons why the monarch numbers, so like the larval, egg, and adult numbers can look pretty low. Another kind of issue that we ran into was there was a pretty big dip in the Midwestern populations within it would have been like between the second and third generation. There was a monarch larval monitoring program post about this and just some of the things that limited monarchs this year. And we had a number of surveys that were occurring during that one kind of little dip in the numbers right there. And so I think that contributed a lot to those zeros. But again, zeros are always data, right? And it kind of helps us to identify times when monarchs wouldn't be present on those military installations. So I think that we did have a comment in here, and I now remember there's a number of military installations that do specific even butterfly tours, right? So Fort McCoy has one that's really great that they run, and then Fort Indiantown Gap in Pennsylvania has a regal survey, and then Fort Riley has a Herp survey in May as well. So make sure that it's just really neat to get out on those landscapes. They're very different to a lot of the surrounding areas as well, which can be really interesting.
I will just mention to our speakers, if you want to check out the questions and stuff, and if you feel like there's something that you want to grab and answer, please feel free. A question here, I'm curious how your project review process would change at the DoD if the monarch went from candidate status to threatened or endangered. Do you anticipate using time of year restrictions or other sorts of mitigation?
I actually was trying to find that so I could read that as well, because there's multiple components to that. Could you read that to me one more time?
Yep. Curious how your project review process would change at the DoD if the monarch went from candidate status to threatened or endangered. Do you anticipate using time of year restrictions or other sorts of mitigation?
So in the DoD Monarch Conservation Strategy, in there we do have best management practices, and we also have some management timing windows that can provide some guidance to installation natural resource managers and when they can time their management activities. And of course, they always have to consider the mission needs first, but there are many cases where we can implement BMPs and still do that in a way that it doesn't negatively affect, training and testing requirements and things like that. And the purpose of the strategy is really to provide this framework where our installations are going to be able to meet their Section 7 requirements if the species is federally listed. And there's going to be some things that the installations will need to do to kind of document compliance with the strategy. We're still kind of working and fine-tuning all of those details, like different forms where they can show consistency with the strategy and things like that. But that's kind of how we're trying to develop a solution that's going to work for as many installations as possible. So I think that's how I would answer that.
We'll do a couple more. One, and maybe this is backing up a little bit, but if someone wants to, and maybe this is Mercy, explaining the difference between MLMP and IMMP.
All right, so MLMP, usually we use that for smaller habitats, right? That's kind of how I think of things. So it's a smaller habitat. It's it can be a lot more frequent. It's great for like pollinator gardens, community gardens. We have tons and tons of resources on our MJV website about MLMP and training. Great for the classroom. IMMP is a little bit more robust in that it has like a fairly large vegetation component, and we're looking at larger landscapes and how the conservation management history contributes to, the milkweed density, floral diversity, and then monarch presence there. So again, you can check out our website. IMMP is something that we help develop with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, USGS, and other sorts of federal partners. It's used across the country, and that's one of the great things about using IMMP on the DoD lands is that we can leverage the rest of the data that we have from across the country to see how those types of properties compare to the DoD managers' efforts on DoD lands. So. I think there is one thing. So I see one from Goodfellow Air Force Base in Texas. Alan, if you could send me an email, that'd be great, because we're going to be having a pretty big push for getting boots on the ground in Texas this year. So if you could email Dejeanne or that'd be awesome.
Awesome. Anything else that y'all see within the questions that you want to tackle in the last minute? I think the other one, just because it's kind of happening at the moment. I don't know, Mercy, if you're like the 30-second speaking to an update on the monarch listing status. Real quick.
So right now, the monarch butterfly has been proposed to be listed under the Endangered Species Act as threatened. And so right now there's a federal comment period where Monarch Joint Venture and other sorts of organizations can help, tailor what that listing decision might look like. And so based on the public comments, that will end in March, and then we are looking for a final ruling in December. And so stay posted. We're going to be doing a number of different webinars and different sorts of decision trees about how that will look. So we have a number of different communication items on our website that can help clarify what the listing decision means.
Great, thank you so much. Again, the email that will come out on Friday will be robust with resources and things for everyone. But I just want to say thank you to Dejeanne, to Mercy, to Stephanie, to Mike, to Alexa for being here today and for your work on this project. Thank you to all for participating. We have not had a webinar this big in a long time, so it's a wonderful way to start 2025. Thank you all so much for being here. We will throw a form in the chat if you would be interested in filling that out. We really appreciate your feedback, helps make the webinar series even better. And we hope to see you all for our next webinar that will happen on Tuesday, February 25th, the butterfly and bumblebee effect, voluntary conservation for at-risk species with Caroline Hernandez, Assistant Director, Sustainable Landscapes Program at the University of Illinois, Chicago. Again, thank you everyone for being here. Thank you to our speakers, and everyone have a wonderful day.